Hello, my name is Fiona. We've reached a very sad but very important part of the Easter account today. Jesus' trial. During the night, all the religious leaders got together at the high priest's house to hold a trial for Jesus. They had persuaded people to tell lies about him so they could find him guilty. The people who lied didn't even agree with each other, but the leaders used what they said as evidence against Jesus. They sentenced him to death and tied him up. Early in the morning, they took him to the Roman governor, Pontius Pilate. The leaders told Pilate that he was a criminal who had been sentenced to death. Pilate knew that they just wanted to get rid of Jesus, so he tried to help him. Because it was a special day, there was a tradition to release a prisoner, and he offered to release Jesus. But the priests encouraged the crowds of people outside to ask for a murderer to be released instead. "What shall I do with Jesus?" Pilate asked. "Kill him on a cross," shouted the crowd. "Why? What has he done wrong?" he replied. The crowd didn't have an answer because Jesus had never done anything wrong. But they shouted even louder, "Kill him on a cross." Pilate was scared of the crowd, so he gave up and sent Jesus to be killed. Jesus is killed on a cross. The soldiers guarding Jesus were unkind to him. They knew that people said he was God's king, so they made fun of him because they didn't believe it. They dressed him up in a robe and made a crown out of sharp, thorny twigs, which they pushed onto his head. They hit him with sticks and spat on him. Then Jesus was led out to be killed on a cross. While he was there, people shouted insults at him. "He saved other people," they said, "but he can't save himself." After 3 hours, the sky went completely dark, even though it was the middle of the day, and it stayed like that until 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Then Jesus gave a loud shout and died. At the moment he died, the curtain in the temple, which separated the people's side from God's special room, tore down the middle from top to bottom. Some of these things sound very strange, but they all happened because Jesus was God's special king. The people were wrong when they said Jesus couldn't save himself. He could have. Remember how powerful he was. But he was choosing to die to rescue people, like we learned yesterday. God's anger and judgment made the sky go dark, but afterwards the curtain in the temple tore to show that there is no longer anything keeping us separate from God. This is a very sad story, but it has a very happy ending for us because we can be friends with God. That's why Christians call the day we remember Jesus dying Good Friday. And the story doesn't end there. Come back tomorrow for our last video.
Hi, now for today's activity we're going to make some Easter biscuits. So I have got all the things that I need ready and I'm going to show them to you one by one, and then I'm going to show you how to make the biscuits. So first of all, in this bowl I've got 100 grams of butter, and I've softened this just by putting it in the microwave for 20 seconds just to make it a little bit softer and easier to mix. I've also got 75 grams of sugar, an egg, 200 grams of flour, that's plain flour, got some salt, I've got 50 grams of currants, and then here I've got some mixed fruit peel, which I'm going to measure out in a minute. I've also got some spices, ground mixed spice and cinnamon, that I'm going to measure out, and I have got some milk which I'm going to add to the mixture later. So first of all, I need to add my sugar to the butter in the big bowl, and then I'm going to mix that together with the mixer. So I've mixed those together now, and so now it is time to add the egg. So I'm going to crack the egg, and then I'm going to break it into my bowl with the butter and the sugar, and then I'm going to mix it together. So that is all mixed. Now we have to add the flour, the salt and the spices. So I'm going to sieve those things in. Here goes the flour. Now for the salt, you just need a pinch of salt, so just a very small amount, and that's going in as well. And for each of the spices you need half a teaspoon. Now I'm going to stir that through the sieve so that it all gets sifted in and there's no lumps in the mixture. And then I'm going to stir it gently in. You don't have to stir the flour too hard like you whisked the butter and the sugar. You just have to be gentle with it. And when you can see that it's all mixed together, so you can't see any individual bits of flour or any brown from the spices, there you've got the dough beginning to form. Then you can add the fruit, currants, and also a tablespoon of peel. I forgot to get my tablespoon out. So there's a tablespoon. Now the good thing about this recipe is that you can make it different ways. So if you don't like currants, or if you don't like this kind of peel, then you could make it different ways, and you could put maybe grate the rind of an orange or a lemon into it instead to make it taste the way that you want it to. And then you need to mix those all in together. And when they're mixed through like that, you're going to put some milk in, but I've got 30 millilitres here, but put a little bit at a time and keep mixing until your dough is soft, but you don't want it to be too sticky because then it will be too hard to cut your biscuits out. And there's my dough mixed together. Now, the next thing that you need to do once the biscuit dough is all mixed is tip it out onto a floured surface. Now, this can be your kitchen bench or your kitchen table, as long as it's clean and as long as you put flour down first so that it doesn't stick. I'm using a pastry mat because that helps it not to stick to the bench, but you don't need to have one of those if you haven't got one. And you will also need your rolling pin and your cutters, which we'll talk about in a minute. So I am going to knead the dough a little bit, which just means that you squish it between your fingers and press it down on the counter or the bench or whatever it is you're using. And then we're going to use the rolling pin, get some flour on the rolling pin so that it doesn't stick, and roll out the dough. Now you want to roll it out to about 5 millimeters, so not very thick at all. That's like 1/2 centimetre. That way you'll get plenty of biscuits out of the dough that you've made. Now when it's rolled out, it's time to do the cutting. Now you can use any shaped cutter. Lots of people have these kind of cutters at home, so you can use that. I've got some, if you've got some nice fancy shapes, you can use those. There's a heart there, there's an Easter egg there. You can even, if you haven't got any cutters at all, you can use a little cup, so that, like a teacup or something like that, to cut a circle in your dough. But today I'm going to use this one because we've been talking about Jesus dying on the cross, because it's Good Friday. So I'm going to make my biscuits cross-shaped, and so I'm going to cut them all out now. Now you can see there's my dough with one biscuit cut out of it. What I've done is I've cut some and then I've gathered all my dough together and rolled it out again to start another go. And here are my biscuits. This is all that I can fit on the tray. Now on the tray I've greased it first of all with some butter, and then I have laid out my biscuits, not touching because they might grow a little bit when they cook in the oven. And the next thing that we have to do is we have to brush the biscuits with some milk. And then when you've done that, you need some sugar, which I'm going to sprinkle over the biscuits. I'm not doing this very tidily because I'm trying to hold the camera at the same time, but before I put it in the oven, I'm going to tidy up the sugar that I've spilt on the tray, because that will burn in the oven. Right, so here are the biscuits covered in sugar and ready to go into the oven. So I have preheated the oven to 200 degrees. If you've got an oven that's not in degrees Celsius, then the temperatures will all be in the description underneath this video to help you. So now I'm going to open the oven and put the biscuits inside. and then they will be in there for 10 to 15 minutes, but keep an eye on them, because if they go too dark you want to take them out. It just depends on your oven. And I now have my biscuits just out of the oven, and what we need to do now is lift them onto a cooling rack. So I'm going to do that now, using a palette knife to lift them off the tray. Now obviously I don't need to tell you, because you've heard plenty of times, that anything to do with the oven you need to get an adult to help you. And not only do you need to get an adult to help you get things out of the oven, but this tray will stay hot for quite a long time, so you need help and oven gloves getting your biscuits off the tray and onto the cooling rack. And here are the biscuits on the cooling rack, just cooling down. Now what you can't tell from where you are is that they smell really lovely, and as soon as you get them out I think you're going to want to try one. So the good thing is they don't take very long to cool down. So I'm going to have one now with my cup of tea. I hope you enjoy making your Easter biscuits and have a really happy Easter.